The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. But what happens when something arrives that exists outside that web entirely? A hunter shaped by mutation and magic from a realm where the Force does not touch? On the day Geralt of Rivia fell through the fabric of reality itself, the Outer Rim gained a legend it had never asked for and could never have anticipated. The twin suns of Tatooine beat down mercilessly on the Dune Sea, baking the sand into an endless expanse of heat shimmer and desolation. Nothing moved in the midday furnace except the wind sculpting dunes into new configurations. Then the air itself tore. It wasn't a hyperspace reversion. No ship emerged. No signature registered on any scanner within 100 kilometers. Instead, reality split like flesh under a blade, a vertical wound in space that bled sickly green light and howled with the screams of 1,000 dying worlds. The rift vomited forth a single figure who hit the sand hard, rolled, and came up in a defensive crouch with silver and steel swords already drawn. Geralt of Rivia scanned his surroundings with cat-yellow eyes, pupils contracting to slits against the brutal sunlight. His Witcher medallion trembled against his chest. Not the violent warning of nearby magic, but a continuous low vibration that spoke of something fundamentally wrong with this place. The air smelled different, tasted different. Even the sun felt alien against his mutated skin. Behind him, the rift sealed with a sound like breaking bone, leaving only unmarked sand and the fading echo of the Wild Hunt's horn. "Fuck," Geralt muttered, the word lost in the wasteland's silence. He'd been tracking a fiend through the forests of Velen when the portal opened beneath him. Not the usual shortcuts the Wild Hunt used. This had been something else, something experimental and catastrophically unstable. He'd felt the pull of multiple realities, dimensions layering over each other like cards shuffled by a drunk gambler, before being spat out here, wherever here was. Geralt sheathed his swords and began walking. The sun's position told him nothing useful. Two suns made navigation by celestial observation impossible without knowing the local astronomy. But years of survival in hostile territories had taught him to read landscapes. The wind patterns suggested a settlement to the northwest, and the faint shimmer on the horizon might be structures or simply more heat distortion. He'd walked less than an hour when the speeder bikes found him. 3 of them, repulsor engines whining as they crested a dune in a spray of sand. The riders wore mismatched armor, salvaged plastoid, leather straps, and crude blast helmets that had seen better decades. Scavengers or raiders, Geralt judged. Predators who'd spotted easy prey wandering alone in the desert. The leader raised a weapon unlike any crossbow or firearm Geralt had encountered. Sleek metal, glowing power cell, designed with the confidence of a civilization that had long ago perfected killing at range. "Credit chit and weapons," the leader called out in a language Geralt shouldn't have understood, but somehow did. Another side effect of however he'd arrived here. "Drop them and you walk away. Refuse and we take them from your corpse." Geralt's hand moved to his silver sword, then hesitated. He didn't know these weapons' capabilities, didn't understand the technology humming in their bikes, couldn't predict what other surprises this world held. But he recognized the body language of men who'd made this demand 100 times before and never faced real resistance. "I don't have any credit chits," Geralt said slowly, testing the strange words on his tongue. "And I'll need the swords." The leader laughed and his companions raised their weapons. "Then we'll—" Geralt's left hand snapped up, fingers forming the sign of Ard. The telekinetic blast erupted from his palm with a sound like thunder, a cone of pure force that caught all 3 speeder bikes and their riders, hurling them backward in a tumbling chaos of metal and screaming. 2 bikes crashed into a dune. The third spun end over end before slamming into the sand hard enough to crack its frame. The Witcher was moving before they finished falling. He crossed the distance in seconds, enhanced speed turning sand into a blur beneath his boots. The first raider was struggling to his feet when Geralt's pommel strike dropped him unconscious. The second managed to raise his blaster before a precise kick sent the weapon spinning away, and a follow-up strike left him groaning in the sand. The leader had kept hold of his blaster. He fired. Geralt's medallion shrieked warning, and he twisted, feeling the air superheat where his chest had been a heartbeat before. A bolt of red energy screamed past, so hot it left after images. The Witcher's mind cataloged the weapon instantly. Ranged, energy-based, likely fatal, probably limited ammunition or power supply. His right hand formed Quen, the protective sign shimmering into existence around him like a soap bubble made of golden light. The second blaster bolt struck the shield and dissipated in a shower of sparks. Before the raider could fire again, Geralt closed the distance and disarmed him with a wrist lock that left the man howling. "Your weapon," Geralt said, retrieving the blaster. Heavy, well-balanced, surprisingly intuitive design. "How does it work? You're a Force user. You're one of them." The raider's eyes were wide with terror behind his cracked helmet. "I didn't know. Please, the Inquisitors will kill us if we touch one of you." "I don't know what that means," Geralt said truthfully. "The weapon. Explain it." Through gasping breaths, the raider described the basics. Energy cell, trigger mechanism, stun versus kill settings, overheating with sustained fire. Geralt listened, asking pointed questions until he understood the fundamentals. Technology far beyond anything on the continent, but the principles of aim and fire remained universal. "Where's the nearest settlement?" Geralt asked finally. "Mos Eisley, 30 kilometers northwest. Spaceport, cantinas, work for anyone with skills." The raider hesitated. "You really don't know where you are, do you?" "No. You're on Tatooine, Outer Rim territories, middle of nowhere. If you're running from the Empire, this is good a place as any to disappear." The raider studied Geralt's armor, his swords, his alien appearance. "You're not from anywhere I've ever seen. What are you?" "A Witcher," Geralt said, though the word clearly meant nothing to his captive. "A hunter." He took one of the functioning speeder bikes, leaving the raiders their weapons and a canteen of water. They'd survive, probably, and spread word of the stranger who'd appeared in the Dune Sea wielding powers like the old stories of Jedi. Geralt disliked the attention such tales would bring, but information flowed both ways. If these Inquisitors came looking, at least he'd have warning. The speeder bike proved easier to operate than he'd expected, responding to subtle weight shifts and hand controls. Geralt pushed it northwest, following the coordinates the raider had provided, while his mind worked through the implications of his situation. A galaxy, the raider had said. Not a continent or world, an entire galaxy of worlds connected by ships that traveled faster than light itself. Magic here was called the Force, wielded by warriors with laser swords who'd apparently been hunted nearly to extinction by something called an empire, and he'd displayed abilities that marked him as connected to this force, making him either valuable or dangerous depending on who found him first. Geralt had survived worse situations. Barely. Mos Eisley resolved from heat shimmer into reality as the afternoon stretched toward evening. A sprawling collection of domed buildings, landing pads, and dusty streets crowded with species Geralt had never imagined. Humans walked alongside beings with tentacles for heads, insectoid creatures the size of cows, and reptilian humanoids covered in scales. The cacophony of languages made his head ache, and the smells, spice, ozone, unwashed bodies, and engine exhaust created an olfactory assault his enhanced senses struggled to filter. No one gave him a second glance. In a spaceport where 100 species mingled, one more strange face barely registered. Geralt abandoned the speeder bike in an alley and made his way toward the sounds of music and voices. He needed information, employment, and eventually a way off this desert rock. In his experience, all three could be found in the same place, wherever people gathered to drink and forget their troubles. The cantina's entrance yawned before him, dark and promising. Geralt of Rivia, professional monster slayer, stepped into the Outer Rim's underworld, ready to learn what kinds of monsters this new galaxy bred. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The cantina smelled of alcohol, smoke, and desperation. Familiar scents in any world. Geralt found a corner booth with good sight lines to both exits and settled in to watch, listen, and learn what kind of hell he'd fallen into. The cantina's interior was a study in controlled chaos. A band of bizarre creatures played instruments Geralt couldn't name, producing music that grated against his sensitive hearing. The patrons represented a dozen species, some humanoid enough to pass for human in dim light, others so alien that Geralt's instincts screamed warnings his conscious mind had to override. None of them were monsters, at least not the kind he was trained to kill. A server approached, a human woman with the worn expression of someone who'd seen too much and profited too little. "What are you drinking?" "Information first," Geralt said. "Then whatever passes for ale here." She raised an eyebrow. "Information costs more than drinks, stranger. What are you buying?" Geralt produced the only currency he had, a handful of Novigrad crowns from his pouch. The woman picked up one of the gold coins, examined it with professional skepticism, then bit it. Her expression shifted from suspicion to interest. "Real gold. Don't see much of that. Forgeries and credit shits mostly." She pocketed the coin. "What do you want to know?" "Work," Geralt said simply. "The kind that pays well and doesn't ask questions." "Bounty hunter?" She studied his swords, his armor, the way he held himself. "You've got the look. Guild's got an office 2 streets over, but they'll want documentation, licenses, imperial clearances, all the bureaucratic bantha shit. You want real work without the paperwork? You talk to the Hutts." "Hutts?" Her expression told him that should have been obvious. "Crime lords run most of the Outer Rim. Jabba's palace is a few hours into the Dune Sea. He always needs muscle, especially the kind that can handle themselves. Saw you come in. You move like you know which end of those swords does the cutting." "I've had practice," Geralt said. "What kind of work do the Hutts offer?" "Collections, enforcement, transportation of goods that don't officially exist. Sometimes hunting." She leaned closer, voice dropping. "Sometimes they need things killed that won't die easy. Creatures from other worlds, experiments that escaped Imperial labs, mutations from the spice trade. You good at killing things?" "It's what I do." The woman's smile held no warmth. "Then you'll do well here. Fair warning, though. Jabba doesn't tolerate failure, and he's got a taste for feeding people to his rancor when they disappoint him. You take a contract, you finish it, or you don't come back." Geralt had worked for worse employers. Barely. "How do I reach him?" "You don't. He reaches you if you're interesting enough." She straightened, professional distance returning. "For now, drink, listen, and try not to start any fights. Wooher doesn't like blood on his floor." She returned moments later with something that looked like ale and tasted like industrial solvent mixed with grain alcohol. Geralt drank it anyway, using the time to observe the cantina's dynamics. Credits changed hands for substances he didn't recognize. Deals were struck in corners with handshakes and nods. A group of armored figures in matching uniforms, soldiers, Geralt judged, threw dice while their weapons rested against the bar. And in the back booth, partially obscured by smoke, sat a massive slug-like creature surrounded by attendants and guards. Even without understanding the local hierarchy, Geralt recognized power when he saw it. The way others gave that booth space, the deference in every interaction, marked its occupant as someone who controlled more than just a table. The Hutt's eyes, small, predatory, intelligent, fixed on Geralt across the cantina. The Witcher met that gaze steadily, neither challenging nor submitting. He'd learned long ago that monsters came in many forms, and the ones that walked on 2 legs were often the most dangerous. A protocol droid approached Geralt's booth, its golden plating catching the dim lights. "Excuse me, sir. The mighty Jabba requests your presence. It would be inadvisable to decline." Geralt stood, one hand resting casually near his sword hilt, and followed the droid through the crowd. The beings around Jabba's booth parted like water, revealing the full, massive bulk of the Hutt crime lord. Jabba the Hutt lounged on his platform, studying Geralt with the calculating gaze of a predator evaluating prey. The Hutt spoke in a bubbling, guttural language. The protocol droid translated, "The mighty Jabba welcomes you to Tatooine. He has heard interesting reports of a stranger in the Dune Sea who attacked Garen's gang with powers like the old Jedi. Yet you wear no robes, carry no lightsaber, and your face is unknown to all databases." "I'm new here," Geralt said simply. Jabba's laugh sounded like mud sliding through a pipe. More guttural speech, more translation. Jabba finds this amusing. New, yes, but from where? You are not in any imperial registry, not in any guild records, not in any bounty database. You simply appear. This makes you either very dangerous or very useful. Perhaps both. I'm a hunter, Geralt said. I kill things that need killing. For the right price. Interest flickered in Jabba's eyes. The Hutt gestured to a Twi'lek woman standing nearby, who produced a datapad with holographic images. The protocol droid continued translating as Jabba spoke. Then perhaps you can solve a problem that has cost Jabba considerable credits and patience. In the canyons west of here, something hunts. It has killed 7 of Jabba's best enforcers, 3 bounty hunters, and an entire spice shipment caravan. The local scavengers call it the Dune Reaper. They say it cannot be killed by blaster or blade. The holographic images showed carnage. Bodies torn apart with savage efficiency, vehicles ripped open like tin cans, scorch marks and claw gouges on rock faces. Whatever had done this was large, powerful, and intelligent enough to set ambushes. Geralt studied the evidence with professional focus, noting the patterns, the kill signatures, the territorial behavior. Show me the tracks, Geralt said. The Twi'lek adjusted the datapad. More images appeared. Deep gouges in sand and stone, triple-clawed and massive. The spacing and depth told Geralt about weight distribution, gait, probable speed. The claw marks on canyon walls suggested climbing ability. Scorch marks indicated either breath weapon or technological augmentation. What do your people say it is? Geralt asked. More translation. Jabba's hunters claim it is a mutated krayt dragon, twisted by Imperial experiments. Others say it is an escape project from a corporate laboratory. The truth is irrelevant. What matters is that it dies, and Jabba's operations resume without further interruptions. Payment, 5,000 credits, plus salvage rights to whatever technology or biological samples you recover. The Empire pays well for certain exotic materials. Jabba's smile was reptilian. Fail, and you join the others as cautionary tale. Succeed, and more lucrative contracts await. Do we have an agreement? Geralt had hunted griffins in Velen, Leshens in Skellige forests, and Jinn bound to ancient wells. He'd tracked prey through blizzards and swamps, faced creatures that could tear through armor like parchment. This Dune Reaper might be unknown to him, but the fundamentals of hunting remain constant. Learn your prey's nature, exploit its weaknesses, strike when it's vulnerable. I'll need supplies, Geralt said. Alchemy ingredients, if this world has equivalents. Access to information about local creature biology. And better weapons if what I'm hunting can survive sustained blaster fire. Jabba's laugh bubbled through the cantina. Practical. Jabba appreciates this. Bib Fortuna will provide what resources are available. The mighty Jabba looks forward to seeing what a hunter from nowhere can accomplish. The protocol droid led Geralt to a side room, where a Twi'lek majordomo waited with crates of equipment. Bib Fortuna's voice was smooth, oily, the sound of a man who survived through manipulation rather than strength. The Hutt is generous with those who prove useful. Blasters, thermal detonators, survival gear, and access to our biological database. I've also included a datapad with maps of the canyon territory. Geralt examined the equipment methodically. The blasters were military-grade, well-maintained with extra power cells. The thermal detonators were essentially sophisticated grenades, useful for collapsing tunnels or creating distractions. The datapad contained topographical data of the hunting ground, marking previous attack sites and probable den locations. The database, Geralt said, show me creatures with similar hunting patterns. Fortuna brought up files on various predators, krayt dragons, gut curs, sandbats, and dozens of other species Geralt had never encountered. He studied each one, noting behavioral patterns, biological vulnerabilities, territorial ranges. The Dune Reaper's behavior matched no single species exactly, but elements appeared across multiple creatures. The ambush tactics of sandbats, the strength of krayt dragons, the intelligence of something that had learned to avoid blaster fire. Either a hybrid, a mutation, or something imported from off-world. Possibly all three. I'll need samples of local plants and creatures, Geralt said. For preparation, Fortuna's head-tails twitched with amusement. You intend to brew potions like the old shamans? How quaint. I intend to prepare properly, Geralt corrected. Hunting without preparation is suicide. He spent the next hours in a secured workshop, grinding ingredients, testing combinations, adapting his Witcher knowledge to this galaxy's biological components. The mushrooms here weren't the same as continent cave fungi, but they contained similar alkaloids. The local reptile venoms could substitute for certain reagents. The catalysts required experimentation. Some compounds reacted violently, others not at all, but eventually Geralt produced crude versions of cat for night vision, swallow for regeneration, and thunderbolt for enhanced reflexes. Not perfect, not as potent as proper Witcher alchemy, but functional. Dawn was breaking over Tatooine's wasteland when Geralt loaded the speeder bike Jabba had provided and headed west toward the canyons. His Witcher senses stretched out, cataloging every scent and sound of this alien desert. Somewhere ahead, something that had killed a dozen experienced hunters waited in the rocks. Geralt had faced worse odds. Barely. But he'd survived them all, and he intended to survive this too. The Dune Reaper would learn what every monster on the continent eventually learned. When Geralt of Rivia took a contract, he finished it. The canyons west of Mos Eisley carved through Tatooine's surface like wounds in flesh, deep gouges where ancient rivers had flowed before the planet became desert. Geralt guided the speeder bike between sandstone walls that rose 100 meters on either side, their surfaces scoured smooth by millennia of wind and sand. The shadows here ran deep and cool, a relief from the brutal suns, but they also concealed ambush points and den entrances, perfect hunting ground for an apex predator. Geralt killed the speeder's engine and continued on foot, his enhanced senses scanning for signs. The sand at the canyon floor showed tracks, humanoid boots, speeder treads, and underneath them all, the deep triple-clawed prints he'd seen in Jabba's hollows. Fresh, less than a day old. The Reaper had passed through here recently, following the same path its previous victims had taken. Smart. It had learned the routes its prey used and waited along them. The first body lay half buried in a sand drift, torn apart with surgical precision. Geralt crouched beside it, studying the wounds with professional detachment. The armor, light plastoid, probably a bounty hunter, had been peeled open like fruit skin. The killing blows were clean: severed spine, crushed skull, massive trauma to vital organs. Quick, efficient, practiced. Whatever the Reaper was, it had killed many times before. Geralt's medallion trembled against his chest, not the violent warning of active magic, but the same continuous, low-level vibration it had maintained since his arrival. Background energy, pervasive and strange, like standing near a ley line, but fundamentally different. He pushed the distraction aside and continued tracking. The canyon branched ahead. Left path showed old tracks. Right path showed fresh ones leading deeper into the rock maze. Geralt chose right, moving with the silent precision of a predator himself. His hand rested near his silver sword, probably useless against a non-magical creature, but the steel blade was strapped across his back, and both were ready. The tracks led to a wider section of canyon, where the walls opened into a natural amphitheater. More bodies here, scattered like broken dolls. A wrecked speeder bike lay on its side, blast marks scoring the canyon walls where someone had fired wildly. And there, carved into the sandstone 30 meters up, a cave entrance, dark and promising. Geralt's nose caught the scent. Rotting meat, blood, musk, and something chemical, fuel or lubricant, synthetic and out of place in a natural den. He marked the cave's location and continued his circuit of the killing ground, reading the story written in sand and blood. The Reaper had attacked from above, dropping onto the victims before they could react. Multiple targets engaged simultaneously, which meant either pack behavior or something large enough to handle several armed beings at once. The blast marks showed desperation, shooting at shadows, at sounds, at anything that moved. None of the shots had connected with vital areas, suggesting the Reaper was fast, armored, or both. A glint of metal caught Geralt's eye. He knelt and brushed sand away from a piece of technology, a weapon grip, scorched and torn from its housing. Not the usual blaster design he'd seen in Mos Eisley. This was heavier, more sophisticated, with Imperial markings barely visible under the damage. An Imperial weapon in a creature's den. Geralt's jaw tightened. The pieces were connecting into an unpleasant picture. This wasn't a natural predator mutated by accident. This was something designed, built, or modified with Imperial technology. The question was whether the creature had simply scavenged from its victims, or whether it had been equipped deliberately. He was considering this when his medallion suddenly screamed warning. Geralt threw himself sideways as something massive crashed down where he'd been standing. Rock exploded under the impact, shards peppering his armor. He rolled, came up with steel sword drawn, and finally saw his prey. The Dune Reaper stood 3 meters tall on digitigrade legs ending in those triple claws. Its body was reptilian, covered in overlapping scales that gleamed like polished Beskar in the canyon light. 4 arms, 2 primary, 2 smaller secondary, each tipped with talons long as daggers. The head was saurian, all teeth and armored skull. But the eyes held intelligence that no simple beast possessed, and embedded in its chest, pulsing with sickly light, was a cylindrical device that Geralt's instincts immediately identified as artificial. Technological. Wrong. The Reaper's chest device flared, and fire erupted from its maw. Not natural flame, but a concentrated stream of chemical incendiary that turned sand to glass. Geralt's left hand snapped up, Quen's shield manifesting just as the fire hit. The protective sign absorbed the first blast but cracked under the sustained assault, fracturing like stressed glass. Geralt rolled behind a boulder as his shield shattered. The fire continued for 3 more seconds, superheating the rock until it glowed. When the flames finally ceased, the Reaper was already moving, circling with the patient confidence of something that had killed everything it had ever hunted. "So you're not just animal," Geralt muttered, watching it move. "Someone made you. Someone armed you." The Reaper's response was a sound between a roar and mechanical scream. Vocal cords damaged or augmented, producing noise that made Geralt's teeth ache. It charged, covering the distance in 3 ground-eating strides, all 4 arms reaching to tear and rend. Geralt met the charge with a witcher's precision. He sidestepped the first claw strike, ducked under the second, and drove his steel sword up under the creature's primary arm, where scales met softer tissue. The blade bit deep, drawing black blood that steamed in the desert air. The Reaper shrieked and backhanded him with enough force to send him flying into the canyon wall. Impact drove the air from Geralt's lungs. His Witcher mutations absorbed damage that would have pulped a normal human, but pain still exploded through his ribs. He tasted copper and realized he'd bitten his tongue. The Reaper was already closing again, bleeding but furious, all 4 arms raised to finish the job. Geralt's right hand formed Ard. The telekinetic blast caught the Reaper mid-charge and hurled it backward into a sand drift. Not as effective as it should have been. The creature was too massive, too heavy, but it bought seconds. Seconds Geralt used to reach into his pouch and down a dose of Thunderbolt. The potion hit his system like liquid lightning, enhanced mutations ramping to combat readiness. His reflexes sharpened, his perception accelerated, his body became a weapon honed to perfect killing edge. The Reaper emerged from the sand drift with that mechanical shriek, chest device glowing brighter. Geralt recognized the tell and moved before the fire came, sprinting along the canyon wall with inhuman speed. Flames chased him, turning rock to slag, but he stayed ahead of the inferno and closed the distance from an unexpected angle. His steel sword found the device in the Reaper's chest. The blade drove through crystal and circuitry, shattering the technological heart. The Reaper convulsed, fire sputtering and dying, its movements becoming spastic. But it wasn't done. Mortally wounded predators were often the most dangerous. All 4 arms grabbed for Geralt, claws finding purchase in his armor, lifting him off the ground. Geralt abandoned finesse. His left hand formed Igni directly into the Reaper's face at point-blank range. Fire met fire, Witcher sign versus whatever fuel the creature had been modified to produce. The competing flames created a backdraft that exploded between them, throwing both hunter and prey apart. Geralt hit the ground rolling, came up with sword ready. The Reaper staggered, its face scorched, one eye burned away, black blood pouring from a dozen wounds. The chest device sparked and smoked, its light dying. The creature looked at Geralt with its remaining eye, and in that gaze the Witcher saw something besides rage. Relief. Then it collapsed. 3 meters of modified flesh and imperial augmentation finally surrendering to death. Geralt approached carefully, sword ready for any final death throes. But the Reaper was truly dead, its enhanced body shutting down as the technology that had kept it alive failed. He knelt beside it, examining the modifications with growing disgust. Surgical scars covered its torso where augmentations had been implanted. The chest device was connected directly to major organs, keeping them functional past normal capacity. Plates of metal had been fused to its skeleton, explaining why his sword hadn't bitten deeper. This hadn't been a natural creature mutated by accident. This had been engineered, enhanced, turned into a weapon, and then abandoned here, left to go mad with pain and augmentation until it became the monster the Empire had designed. "You were someone's experiment," Geralt said quietly to the corpse. "Someone's weapon. I'm sorry." He said it to all his contracts eventually. Even the monsters were victims of something. His search of the den revealed more evidence. Imperial equipment crates, medical supplies, restraint systems built for something the Reaper's size. This had been a holding facility, probably unofficial, where someone had conducted biological experiments away from oversight. The project had either been abandoned or the Reaper had escaped, and it had been killing everything in its territory ever since. Geralt extracted the chest device carefully. Whatever it was, Jabba would want to see it, and it represented evidence of Imperial activity the Hutt might find valuable. He also took genetic samples and documentation he found sealed in a waterproof case. Research notes written in that strange, universal language he somehow understood. The notes confirmed his suspicions. Project Apex Predator, authorized by someone called Moff Vallis, designed to create enhanced creatures for garrison duty on hostile worlds. The Reaper, Subject 7 in the files, had been the most successful surviving augmentation that killed 6 previous specimens. Then funding had been cut, the facility abandoned, and Subject 7 left to die or adapt. It had adapted, and now it was dead by Geralt's hand, which was probably a mercy. The ride back to Mos Eisley took most of the day. Geralt's ribs ached despite his Witcher healing, and the Thunderbolt potion left him with a familiar crash of enhanced chemistry wearing off. But he'd completed the contract, and the evidence he carried would prove it. Jabba's court received him with the same mixture of greed and respect as before. The Hutt examined the chest device with obvious interest, his thick fingers manipulating controls on a diagnostic scanner, while technicians scurried to analyze the genetic samples. The protocol droid translated Jabba's bubbling speech. "The mighty Jabba is impressed. Subject 7 had eluded hunters for 6 months, yet you killed it in a single day. This speaks to considerable skill or considerable power." The Hutt's eyes narrowed. "These signs you use, Garen's men say you threw them with invisible force, that you shielded yourself with golden light, that you burned Subject 7's face with fire from your hand. These are not common abilities in the Outer Rim, stranger, not since the Jedi fell." "I'm not a Jedi," Geralt said flatly. "No," Jabba agreed through his droid. "You are something else, something unknown. This makes you valuable and dangerous. Jabba will honor the contract, 5,000 credits transferred to this account chip. But know that others will hear of you. The Empire does not tolerate Force sensitives beyond their control. Inquisitors hunt such beings across the galaxy." "Let them try," Geralt said, pocketing the credit chip. "I've dealt with witch hunters before." He left Jabba's presence with payment secured and reputation established. But as he walked through Mos Eisley streets toward the cantina, Geralt's enhanced hearing caught whispers in his wake. Stranger, Force user, dangerous, unknown. The galaxy was noticing him, which meant complications were coming. And somewhere in the shadows of the spaceport, eyes that served the Empire were already composing reports about the hunter who wielded powers like a Jedi, but fought like something else entirely. 3 days after killing the Dune Reaper, Geralt stood in a Mos Eisley workshop grinding cave mushrooms and distilling venom from a local sandviper species. The credits from Jabba's contract had secured him temporary lodging in the warehouse district, a space with water, minimal privacy, and enough room to practice his alchemy without interruption. The Empire might be hunting Force sensitives, but Geralt had spent years evading witch hunters on the continent. Different world, same principles. Stay mobile, avoid attention, trust no one. The problem was that avoiding attention proved impossible when your work made you conspicuous. His medallion trembled a warning seconds before his door exploded inward. Geralt's hand went to his sword as three figures entered through the smoke and debris. Not Imperial soldiers. Their armor was too personalized, too worn. Beskar plates gleamed beneath desert-stained fabric. T-visored helmets tracked his movements with professional precision, and the weapons they carried were maintained with the care of people whose lives depended on their equipment. Mandalorians. Geralt of Rivia, the leader said, voice filtered through his helmet's vocoder into something flat and mechanical. You've made quite an impression in 3 days. Killed Jabba's problem creature, walked away from a fight with 3 raiders, and supposedly used force powers that don't match any known Jedi technique. We want to know what you are. A hunter, Geralt said, hand still on his sword hilt. Same as you, from the look of it. Not the same. The Mandalorian's helmet tilted slightly, assessing. I'm Joran Starfall, clan leader of what's left of Clan Starfall after the Empire's purge. These are my sworn, Mira and Torvin. We hunt, we survive, and we don't trust Force users. Too many memories of Jedi betraying their own codes, of the Empire's Inquisitors burning worlds. I'm not a Jedi, Geralt said for the second time in 3 days, and I'm not with your Empire. Prove it, Mira said, her blaster trained steadily on his chest. Show us these signs everyone's talking about. If you're a Jedi hiding in the Outer Rim, we'll know. Geralt measured the distance, calculated odds, considered options. 3 Mandalorians in full armor, with clear firing lines and professional discipline. Fighting would be bloody and pointless. Talking might work better. And the fact they were talking instead of shooting suggested they wanted information more than corpses. He raised his left hand and formed Ard. The telekinetic blast erupted from his palm, invisible force that caught a workbench and sent it sliding 5 meters across the floor without touching it. Then Igni, concentrated flame that burned for 3 seconds before Geralt closed his fist and snuffed it. Finally Quen, the golden shield manifesting around him like a second skin before dissolving. These are signs, Geralt said into the silence that followed. Basic techniques. Where I come from, trained practitioners use them. Not the same as your Force, but apparently close enough to confuse people here. Joran lowered his blaster slightly. Where you come from, and where is that? Somewhere else. Geralt met the Mandalorian's gaze through his helmet's visor. A different world. I didn't choose to come here, and I don't know how to leave. So I'm doing what I always do, taking contracts, killing monsters, surviving. The 3 Mandalorians exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Joran holstered his blaster. You fight like a Mandalorian, practical, efficient, no wasted movement. Mira watched your approach to the Reaper's den. You scouted, prepared, struck when you had advantage. That's not Jedi philosophy. They prefer meditation and letting the Force guide them. The Force doesn't guide me, Geralt said. Experience does. Preparation. Knowing your prey's habits and exploiting them. Good answer. Joran's posture shifted from hostile to considering. The reason we're here, beyond confirming you're not another Inquisitor in disguise, is that we have a problem that needs your particular skills. Something that's been hunting in the Yunlin wastes. Local Tuscans are terrified, which means it's dangerous enough to scare beings who've survived this desert for millennia. 3 of our clan went to investigate 2 weeks ago. Only 1 came back, and she died from her wounds before she could explain what killed the others. What did she say before she died? Geralt asked. Silver eyes in the dark, moved like smoke. Couldn't track it, couldn't kill it, couldn't run from it. Mira's voice carried carefully controlled grief. Kessa was one of our best scouts. If something killed her and two warriors, it's beyond normal prey. Geralt's professional instincts engaged immediately. Show me what you have. Tracks, attack site, anything she brought back. Torvin produced a datapad with holographic images. The attack site showed blast marks but no blood except from the victims. Claw marks on rocks suggested something with retractable talons, and the spacing indicated a creature roughly human-sized rather than massive. One image showed a fragment of what looked like scale or chitin, gleaming with an iridescent sheen that caught light strangely. Silver eyes, Geralt mused, could be natural biology or technological augmentation. After seeing the Dune Reaper, I don't rule out Imperial experiments. That's our concern, Joran said. The Empire's been conducting biological research in secret facilities across the Outer Rim. Most of their subjects don't survive long after release or escape, but some do, and they're always dangerous. Why come to me instead of hunting it yourselves? Because you killed the Reaper in one day when bounty hunters failed for 6 months, Mira said bluntly. Because you use techniques we don't understand, which means you might see things we miss. And because Mandalorians respect skill, wherever it comes from. If you help us kill this thing, we'll consider you an ally. That's worth more than credits in the Outer Rim. Geralt studied the three warriors. He'd worked with professional soldiers before, the Blue Stripes in Temeria, various guards and mercenaries across the continent. These Mandalorians had the same disciplined competence, the same warrior culture that valued action over words. An alliance with them would provide resources, information, and backup in a galaxy where he currently had none of those things. Standard contract terms, Geralt said. I track and kill the creature. You provide support, equipment, and don't interfere with my methods. Whatever we find regarding Imperial experiments, you share. Agreed? Joran extended his hand. Agreed. Welcome to the hunt, Geralt of Rivia. The handshake was firm, warrior to warrior. Geralt felt something settle. Not trust exactly, but mutual respect between professionals who understood that survival meant competence. We leave at dawn, Joran continued. The Junland wastes are 2 hours by speeder. Tusken tribes have agreed to meet us and share what they know, which is unprecedented. Whatever's hunting out there has them scared enough to ask outsiders for help. Anything else I should know about these Tuskens? Geralt asked. Territorial, proud, deeply spiritual, Mira said. They view the desert as sacred and themselves as its guardians. They'll test you, probably challenge your right to hunt in their lands. Don't back down, but don't insult their traditions either. Show respect and competence, and they'll work with you. Geralt nodded. He'd navigated similar situations with Skellige clans and forest communities that viewed Witchers with suspicion. The principles remained constant across worlds. Demonstrate capability, honor agreements, and never underestimate local knowledge. The Mandalorians left to prepare, promising to return at first light. Geralt spent the remaining hours of darkness brewing more potions and checking his equipment. The steel sword needed sharpening after the Reaper fight. His armor had held up well, but showed stress fractures that needed attention. The blaster he'd taken from the raiders had proven useful. He spent an hour practicing with it until the trigger pull and energy discharge became second nature. Technology and signs, steel and silver. Whatever this galaxy threw at him, Geralt would adapt. Dawn broke over Mos Eisley in shades of orange and gold. The Mandalorians arrived precisely on time, each on speeder bikes loaded with supplies. Geralt mounted the bike they'd provided and followed them out of the spaceport, into the wasteland where something with silver eyes hunted in darkness. The Yunlin Wastes lived up to their name. Where the dune sea was endless sand, the wastes were broken rock and treacherous canyons, a maze of stone that swallowed sound and concealed 1,000 hiding places. Ideal territory for ambush predators and beings who knew how to use terrain. The Tusken camp materialized from the landscape like it had grown from the rock itself. Hide tents reinforced with scavenged metal, weapons that mixed traditional Gadurfi sticks with stolen blaster rifles, and raiders who watched the approaching speeders with suspicion, barely controlled by necessity. A Tusken stepped forward, taller than the others, His robes marked with symbols Geralt didn't recognize, but understood meant authority. The raider spoke in a language of harsh syllables and gestures, and to Geralt's surprise, Joran responded in the same tongue with perfect fluency. He says the Silver Death has taken 8 of their people in the last month, Joran translated. It hunts at night, strikes without warning, and leaves no bodies, only blood and the memory of silver eyes in darkness. They've tried to track it, to trap it, to kill it. Nothing works. It's like fighting smoke. Ask him about the blood, Geralt said. What color? How much? Any unusual characteristics? More exchange in the Tuscan language. Red, human, or similar biology, large quantities, suggesting fatal wounds. But no bodies, which means either the creature consumes its prey completely or drags them to a den. Den location. The Tuscan leader gestured toward the deeper wastes, a section of canyon so twisted and vertical that even the raiders avoided them. His next words were long and complex, and Joran's translation carried weight. He says the Silver Death lairs in the wound, a canyon system the Tuscans consider cursed. Ships have crashed there over generations, leaking fuel and chemicals that poison the rock. Nothing natural lives in the wound anymore. Only death. Geralt's medallion trembled harder, that continuous vibration spiking into something sharper. Not quite the warning of active magic, but close. Something in those canyons resonated with energy that made his witcher senses scream caution. That's where we'll find it, Geralt said. Show me the way. The Tuscan leader studied Geralt with eyes hidden behind his mask, then spoke directly to him in that harsh language. Geralt didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. Prove yourself worthy or die trying. He's offering a guide, Joran said, but the guide won't fight. Tuscans believe the Silver Death is a spirit of vengeance, punishment for defiling sacred land. They'll show you where it hunts, but killing it is your burden. That's fine, Geralt said. I work alone anyway. The Tuscan gestured to a younger raider who gathered supplies with efficient movements. Within minutes, the hunting party was ready. 3 Mandalorians, 1 Witcher, and a Tuscan guide, heading into canyons where something with silver eyes waited in poison darkness. Geralt checked his potions one final time and felt the familiar pre-hunt focus settle over him. Different world, different prey, same ancient dance between hunter and hunted. He'd survived worse. Barely, but he'd survived them all. The wound lived up to its name. The canyon system cut into Tatooine's bedrock like an infected gash. Walls rising so steep and narrow that the twin suns barely penetrated to the floor below. Crashed starships jutted from the rock at impossible angles. A freighter's hull half buried in sand, a fighter craft impaled on a stone spire, hull fragments scattered like shrapnel across decades of accumulation. Chemical runoff had stained the stone in streaks of toxic green and purple, and the air tasted of metal and decay. Geralt's Witcher senses cataloged every detail. The smell, ozone, fuel residue, something organic and wrong underneath. The sound, wind whistling through broken hull plating, creating an eerie harmony that set teeth on edge. The feel, his medallion vibrating continuously now, responding to something that wasn't quite magic, but close enough to register. No wonder the Tuscans avoid this place, Mira muttered, her helmet sensors scanning the canyon walls. Radiation readings are elevated, but not fatal. Chemical contamination in the groundwater, and enough metal debris to hide a dozen ambush points. The Tuscan guide stopped at the canyon's entrance, gesturing deeper into the wound with clear reluctance. He spoke rapidly to Joran, who translated, "This is as far as he goes. The Silver Death's territory begins here. He says to watch the shadows, trust nothing you see, and if you hear singing, run." "Singing?" Geralt asked. "Probably local superstition," Torvin said, checking his blaster's charge. "Fear makes people hear things." But Geralt had hunted sirens in Skellige waters and banshees in Velen forests. He'd learned long ago that superstitions usually had kernels of truth buried in exaggeration. We assume it's real until proven otherwise. Everyone stays alert, watches each other's backs, and calls out anything unusual. The Mandalorians nodded, professional discipline overriding skepticism. They entered the wound in tactical formation, Joran on point, Mira and Torvin on flanks, Geralt in the center where his enhanced senses could detect threats from any direction. The first hour passed in tense silence, broken only by the crunch of boots on contaminated sand. They passed wreckage from ships Geralt couldn't identify, sleek fighters, bulky transports, even what looked like escape pods that had never opened. Each crash represented someone's death, their final moments frozen in twisted metal. Movement, Mira said suddenly, her rifle tracking left. Thermal signature, humanoid, 20 meters. Geralt's enhanced vision pierced the canyon's gloom. A figure crouched behind a fuel tank, partially obscured but definitely present. Human-shaped, too still, watching them. Could be a survivor, Torvin suggested. Someone living rough in the wastes. Or bait, Geralt countered. His medallion's vibration had intensified. Hold position. I'll investigate. He approached the figure carefully, sword drawn, every sense straining. The smell hit him first. Wrong, chemically preserved, like formaldehyde mixed with decay. The figure didn't move as Geralt circled, didn't react to his presence, didn't breathe. Because it was already dead. The corpse had been positioned deliberately, propped against the fuel tank in a sitting position. Desiccated tissue stretched over bones, clothing rotted to fragments. But the eyes had been replaced. Silver spheres gleamed in the sockets, catching light and reflecting it with unnatural intensity. Not natural biology. Technological augmentation installed post-mortem. It's a lure, Geralt called back. Dead body modified with... The silver eyes flashed brilliant white. Geralt threw himself sideways as the corpse exploded. Not a conventional explosion, no fire or shrapnel, but a pulse of energy that made his medallion scream and his vision white out. Sonic weapon, his brain cataloged through the disorientation. Designed to stun, disable, make prey vulnerable. Through ringing ears, Geralt heard the Mandalorian shouting. Blaster fire lit the canyon, red bolts ricocheting off stone and metal. Something moved in the shadows, fast, fluid, multiple somethings that his compromised senses couldn't quite track. His vision cleared enough to see them. 3 figures, humanoid but wrong, their bodies covered in that iridescent scale skin he'd seen in the hollow images. They moved like liquid, impossibly flexible, flowing around cover and obstacles. Silver eyes gleamed from faces that might have been human once, but had been surgically altered into something else. They wore the remains of imperial uniforms, but their hands ended in retractable claws that gleamed like surgical steel. Not creatures, soldiers, modified, augmented, turned into weapons. The nearest one lunged at Torvin, moving faster than blaster tracking could follow. Geralt intercepted with enhanced Witcher speed, steel sword meeting clawed hands in a shower of sparks. The thing's strength was immense. It drove Geralt backward, claws seeking his throat, silver eyes reflecting his own face with empty recognition. Geralt's left hand formed Ard at point-blank range. The telekinetic blast hurled the attacker into a canyon wall hard enough to crack stone. It dropped, limbs twitching, but was already trying to rise. Geralt followed up with a precise thrust through its chest cavity, finding the heart with professional accuracy. The thing died with a sound like escaping steam, body convulsing once before going still. 2 more closing from the right. Mira's blaster fire kept one pinned behind cover, while Joran engaged the other in close combat. The Mandalorian's Beskar armor turned aside claws that should have disemboweled him, and his vibroblade found gaps in the creature's augmented hide. But the second attacker was already flanking, coming at Mira from an angle her armor's sensors couldn't track fast enough. Geralt moved, swallowing a dose of cat potion mid-stride. The alchemical mixture hit his system, and his vision exploded into clarity. Darkness became readable. Details emerged from shadow. Movement patterns became predictable. He intercepted the flanking attacker with a classic Witcher pirouette, blade describing a perfect arc that opened the thing's throat. Black blood sprayed, mixing with toxic sand, and the creature collapsed gurgling. The third one broke and ran, disappearing into the canyon's depths with fluid speed that even Geralt's enhanced vision struggled to follow. Joran raised his blaster, tracking, but Geralt stopped him. "Let it go. We need to understand what we're dealing with." The three of them regrouped, checking for injuries. Torvin had superficial cuts where claws had found gaps in his armor. Mira's helmet had a deep gouge that had come centimeters from penetrating. Joran was unharmed but breathing hard from the exertion. Geralt knelt beside the corpses, examining them with professional detachment. The augmentations were extensive. Subcutaneous armor plating, enhanced musculature, neural modifications that he could see through the surgical scars. The silver eyes weren't decorative. They were sophisticated sensor packages that provided enhanced vision and probably other capabilities. "These were Imperial soldiers," Mira said, scanning one corpse with her medical analyzer. "Human baseline, augmented with technology I've never seen. Neural implants, skeletal reinforcement, genetic modification at the cellular level. This is beyond standard Imperial augmentation. Special project," Joran said grimly. "Something off the books and highly classified. They created enhanced soldiers for infiltration and assassination. Then something went wrong. Or they were abandoned here like the Dune Reaper," Geralt said. "Left to survive or die in the wound. They've been hunting to stay alive, using bodies as lures, ambushing anything that enters their territory." "How many?" Torvin asked the question they were all thinking. Geralt studied the canyon, his Witcher senses stretching out. His enhanced hearing caught movement in multiple directions, clicks and scrapes that might be wind-blown debris or careful repositioning. His nose detected multiple scent trails, old and new, suggesting a pack operating together. His medallion vibrated with that constant warning, responding to the technological augmentations like they were magical constructs. "At least a dozen," he said finally. "Maybe more." This wasn't three soldiers abandoned. This was a full squad, modified and released into this canyon as part of some experiment. "We killed two. One escaped. The rest are watching us right now, deciding if we're prey or threat." "Then we need to be threat," Joran said. "Make them afraid to attack. Or we find their central den and eliminate them at their most vulnerable," Geralt countered. "These augmentations require maintenance, power, probably regular chemical treatments. They'll have a base camp somewhere in the wound where they store supplies and rest between hunts." Mira's helmet tilted toward a crashed transport ship wedged between two canyon walls. "There. That freighter's hull is intact enough to provide shelter. Elevated position for security. Close to water runoff from the chemical contamination. They might be using it for something." Geralt studied the wreckage. His enhanced vision picked out details. Disturbed sand around the entry ramp. Faint chemical traces consistent with the augmented soldier's scent. And something else. Lights. Faint but present, glowing from inside the hull. "That's it," he confirmed. "They're using the freighter as a base. Question is whether we assault directly or draw them out." "How many can you handle alone?" Joran asked bluntly. Geralt considered his potion supply, his sign's limitations, his physical condition after already fighting two augmented soldiers. "In optimal conditions, maybe 5 or 6 before I'm overwhelmed. These aren't ordinary prey. They're enhanced, coordinated, fighting on home territory." "Then we fight together," Mira said. "Mandalorians don't abandon allies in battle." "And we have advantages they don't," Torvin added. "Explosives, long-range weapons, and the element of surprise if we're clever." Geralt felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not quite trust, but the beginning of it. He'd spent so long working alone, relying only on his own skills, that fighting beside competent warriors felt strange. But these Mandalorians had proven themselves professional, disciplined, and willing to adapt tactics. "All right," he said. "Here's how we do this." The plan came together quickly, each member contributing based on their expertise. Torvin would use thermal detonators to collapse the canyon wall near the freighter, creating a distraction and limiting escape routes. Mira would provide covering fire from an elevated position, her rifle's range keeping augmented soldiers pinned. Joran would breach the hull with Geralt, clearing the interior room by room, and Geralt would lead, using his enhanced senses to detect ambushes and his signs to counter the soldiers' advantages. "One more thing," Geralt said as they prepared. "These soldiers were human once. They were turned into weapons by someone else's choices. If any of them surrender, if any of them show signs of wanting to stop, we don't kill them. Understood?" The Mandalorians exchanged glances. Finally, Joran nodded. "Understood. But if they don't surrender, we show no mercy. These things have killed too many already." "Agreed," Geralt said. They moved into position as Tatooine's suns began their descent, painting the wound in shades of orange and shadow. Geralt swallowed another dose of cat, sharpening his night vision for the coming darkness. His steel sword felt perfectly balanced in his hand, familiar and reliable. His signs thrummed with readiness, waiting to be unleashed. Somewhere ahead in that crashed freighter, augmented soldiers waited in their technological den. They'd been abandoned, turned into monsters, left to hunt or die in poison canyons. Geralt understood that fate better than most. Witchers were also made, not born, children subjected to mutations that killed more than they transformed. The difference was that Witchers chose their path afterward. These soldiers hadn't been given that choice. "Ready?" Joran's voice crackled through the comm unit they'd given Geralt. "Ready," Geralt confirmed. Torvin triggered the first detonator, and the canyon wall exploded into the approaching night. The explosion tore through the canyon wall with a sound like the world breaking. Rock and metal debris rained down, creating a cascade that blocked the freighter's primary escape route and sent tremors through the entire structure. Dust billowed in choking clouds, turning twilight into premature night. Exactly as planned. Geralt moved through the chaos with Witcher speed, cat potion rendering the darkness transparent. His enhanced vision picked out heat signatures inside the freighter. Bodies scrambling, repositioning, preparing for attack. 12 distinct signatures, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of military training still functioning beneath augmentation. Mira's rifle opened fire from her elevated position, red bolts stitching across the freighter's hull. Not aimed to kill, aimed to herd. Each shot forced the augmented soldiers away from advantageous positions, driving them deeper into the ship where corridors narrowed, and room by room fighting favored the attackers. Geralt reached the hull breach first, Joran half a step behind. The Mandalorian tossed a flash grenade through the opening, and they breached the moment it detonated. Blinding light filled the corridor, useless against Geralt's potion-enhanced vision, devastating to the silver-eyed soldiers inside. The first augmented soldier came at them blind, claws extended, relying on implanted sensors. Geralt's steel sword found its throat before it registered his presence. The second tried to retreat, and Joran's vibroblade punched through its spine with Mandalorian efficiency. "Two down," Joran reported through comms. "Moving to Section 2. The freighter's interior was a maze of corridors and storage bays, half collapsed from the crash and decades of neglect. Emergency lighting flickered, casting shadows that danced and deceived. But Geralt's medallion provided perfect tracking. Each augmented soldier registered as a spike in that continuous vibration, technological signatures his Witcher senses interpreted as hostile presence. "Three contacts ahead," Geralt warned, setting ambush at the junction. They approached carefully, and Geralt's left hand formed Yrden on the floor. The trap sign manifested as a circle of purple energy, invisible to normal sight, but blazingly obvious to his cat-enhanced vision. The moment an augmented soldier stepped into it, the trap would activate, slowing movement and disrupting technological systems. The ambush came exactly as predicted. 3 soldiers dropped from ceiling panels, claws extended, coordinated to overwhelm with simultaneous strikes from multiple angles. The first hit Geralt's Quen shield and bounced off, momentarily stunned. The second landed in the Yrden trap, and its movements became sluggish, enhanced speed negated by the sign's interference. The third engaged Joran directly, and Beskar met augmented claws in a shower of sparks. Geralt killed the stunned one with a thrust through its eye socket. The silver sensor package provided a perfect target. He followed up with an Ard blast that hurled the trapped soldier into a bulkhead hard enough to dent metal. Joran finished his opponent with a combination attack that opened its chest cavity and exposed the mechanical augmentations beneath. 9 left, Geralt said, his enhanced hearing tracking movement deeper in the ship. They're falling back to a central location. Fortified position, probably. Then we dig them out, Joran said, reloading his blaster. They advanced through the freighter's bowels, clearing each section methodically. Twice more augmented soldiers attempted ambushes, and twice more Geralt's signs and the Mandalorian's firepower proved superior to enhanced biology. But each fight cost resources: potion duration, energy for signs, ammunition for blasters, and the remaining soldiers were learning, adapting their tactics with frightening speed. They're not just attacking randomly anymore, Joran observed. They're testing us, probing for weaknesses. Geralt had noticed the same thing. The soldiers' movements showed tactical thinking, coordinated responses, even what might be communication through their neural implants. Whatever augmentation process they'd undergone hadn't destroyed their intelligence. It had preserved it while adding predatory instincts. The central chamber was the freighter's old cargo bay, a space large enough for a small ship with catwalks running along the walls. Emergency lighting had been supplemented with scavenged power cells, creating a harsh illumination that revealed the full horror of what the soldiers had built here. Bodies hung from the ceiling: Tusken raiders, bounty hunters, even a few unlucky moisture farmers, preserved with chemicals and positioned like trophies. The floor was covered in salvaged equipment, weapons, technology stripped from victims and integrated into a makeshift workshop. And in the center, surrounded by the 6 remaining augmented soldiers, sat a massive cylindrical device that Geralt's medallion screamed warnings about. "What is that?" Joran breathed. Geralt's enhanced vision analyzed the device, cataloging details: imperial markings, medical equipment attached via cables, chemical tanks feeding into injection ports. Life support system, augmentation maintenance. They need it to survive. Their modifications require constant chemical balance, or their bodies reject the implants. One of the soldiers stepped forward, and Geralt realized it was the one that had escaped earlier. It raised a hand, not in attack, but in a gesture that might have been communication. Its throat worked, mechanical voice box producing sounds that scraped like metal on stone. "Leave, or die, here." The words were barely comprehensible, vocal cords damaged by augmentation. But the meaning was clear, and so was the desperation beneath the threat. "You're dying anyway," Geralt said, keeping his voice level and non-threatening. "Those augmentations are breaking down. I can smell the chemical imbalance from here. How long before the maintenance system fails completely?" The soldier's silver eyes flickered, and for a moment Geralt saw past the monster to the human underneath. Days, weeks, supplies, running out. No rescue, no orders, no choice. "There's always a choice," Geralt said. "You don't have to keep killing. The Tuskens, the hunters, the innocent people just trying to cross the wastes. They're not your enemy. Everyone, enemy, everyone, prey." The soldier's voice carried no emotion, just flat statement of fact. "We hunt, we survive, we die. Orders." "Your orders are gone," Joran said, stepping up beside Geralt. "The Empire abandoned you here. Whatever mission you had is over. You can choose to stop." The 6 soldiers exchanged glances, some silent communication passing through their neural links. The leader's claws extended, retracted, extended again. Indecision made visible. Behind them, the maintenance system hummed, its lights flickering with power fluctuations that spoke of imminent failure. "If we stop, what then?" The mechanical voice struggled with concepts beyond hunt, kill, survive. "What are we? Without orders." "Survivors," Geralt said. "Same as anyone else in the Outer Rim. You find work, take contracts, make your own choices, or you die here and no one remembers you were ever human." It was the wrong thing to say. The soldier's silver eyes flared, and rage, pure, incandescent, very human rage, filled its mechanical voice. "Not human, never human again. They took everything, made us weapons, tested us, broke us, used us, then threw us away. No choice, never choice, never choice." The other soldiers tensed, feeding off their leader's fury. Geralt's medallion vibrated so hard it hurt, warning of imminent violence. He prepared Quen, ready to shield against the coming attack. But before anyone could move, a new voice echoed through the cargo bay. Well, well, how touching. The monsters want redemption. Geralt spun, sword ready, tracking the voice to a catwalk entrance. A figure stood there, silhouetted against emergency lighting. Humanoid, armored in black and red, carrying a weapon that ignited with a snap hiss into a blade of pure crimson energy. A lightsaber, held by someone whose presence made Geralt's medallion scream louder than it ever had. I am Inquisitor Valen, the figure announced, descending to the cargo bay floor with Force-assisted grace. And I've been tracking the rogue Force-sensitive, disrupting operations in this sector. Imagine my surprise when I find not only my quarry, but the Empire's failed apex predator subjects as well. The Inquisitor was human, his face marked with ritual scars that spoke of dark-side devotion. His eyes were yellow, corrupted by whatever power he served. And when he looked at Geralt, recognition flickered across his features. You're not from here, Valen said with dawning delight. Your Force presence is all wrong, twisted, foreign, fundamentally incompatible with the galaxy's natural order. You're not a Jedi, not a Sith, not even a failed Force sensitive. You're something else entirely. I don't care what you think I am, Geralt said, shifting his stance to account for this new threat. I'm leaving with these Mandalorians. The soldiers can choose their own fate, and you can report to your Empire that I'm not interested in their politics. Valen's laugh was cold. Oh, you misunderstand. I'm not here to recruit you. I'm here to dissect you, study what you are, learn how someone from outside our reality can manipulate energies that should be impossible for them. And then once I understand, I'll take that knowledge to my master and be rewarded beyond measure. The Inquisitor raised his free hand, and Geralt felt pressure slam into him. Not physical force, but something that bypassed his body and grabbed his mind directly. The Force, he realized, the energy that permeated this galaxy, being weaponized against him by someone who'd mastered its dark side. His Witcher mutations screamed resistance. Whatever this Force was, it wasn't magic as he understood it, but his signs drew on similar principles. Geralt formed Quen instinctively, and the shield manifested not just around his body, but around his mind, pushing back against the invasive pressure. Valen's eyes widened. Impossible! Your shield shouldn't work against the Force. You're not even Force-sensitive. I don't need to be, Geralt said through gritted teeth, maintaining the shield. Where I come from, we have our own ways of fighting magic. Joran and Mira opened fire, blaster bolts screaming toward the Inquisitor. Valen's lightsaber became a blur of red light, deflecting every shot with contemptuous ease. One bolt ricocheted back at Torvin, who barely dodged behind cover. The augmented soldiers moved as one, attacking not Geralt or the Mandalorians but the Inquisitor. Years of Imperial conditioning broke under the weight of abandonment and rage. They swarmed Valen with coordinated precision, claws seeking gaps in his armor, enhanced strength attempting to overwhelm even Force-augmented reflexes. Valen's lightsaber carved through the first soldier, the energy blade cutting through augmented flesh and metal implants with equal ease. The second lost both arms before a Force push hurled it into the maintenance system, shattering vital components. The third managed to rake claws across Valen's face before being impaled through the chest. 3 soldiers died in as many seconds, but their sacrifice bought time. Geralt surged forward, steel sword meeting lightsaber in a shriek of tortured metal. His blade held barely, the Witcher steel conducting enough heat to glow red, but not melting immediately. Valen's surprise gave Geralt the opening for Ard, the telekinetic blast catching the Inquisitor mid-strike and hurling him backward. Fascinating, Valen said, rising from the debris. His face bled from the soldier's claws, but he smiled through the pain. You fight like no Force user I've encountered. Crude, direct, but effective. This will be educational. The remaining 3 augmented soldiers attacked again, and this time Geralt and the Mandalorians fought alongside them. Not allies exactly, but united by common enemy. Blaster fire, lightsaber, steel sword, and augmented claws filled the cargo bay with violence. And through it all, Geralt's mind worked frantically. His steel sword wouldn't survive prolonged lightsaber contact. His signs were effective but limited, and Valen was skilled, experienced, wielding power Geralt didn't fully understand. This fight was far from over, and the odds were not in their favor. The cargo bay became a whirlwind of violence and desperation. Valen's lightsaber carved through another augmented soldier, bisecting the torso with surgical precision. The dying soldier's momentum carried it forward, claws raking across the Inquisitor's armor before it collapsed in two pieces. 5 soldiers dead now, their enhanced bodies proving no match for a weapon that cut through metal and flesh with equal contempt. Geralt pressed the attack while Valen was momentarily occupied, his steel sword aimed at gaps in the Inquisitor's armor. Valen sensed the strike, some precognition the Force apparently granted, and twisted aside, lightsaber coming up in a counter-strike that Geralt barely parried. Metal screamed as the blades met, and Geralt felt his sword weakening, the molecular structure compromising under repeated contact with pure plasma. "Your weapon won't last," Valen observed, driving Geralt back with a flurry of precise strikes. "Primitive steel against a lightsaber? You might as well fight with a stick." Geralt didn't waste breath on response. His left hand formed Igni mid-retreat, fire blasting from his palm directly at Valen's face. The Inquisitor raised a hand and the flames parted around an invisible barrier. The Force again, manipulated into shield form. But the fire's heat distorted air, and for a critical half-second, Valen's vision was compromised. Mira's sniper bolt took him in the shoulder. The Inquisitor staggered, armor cracking under the concentrated energy. Pain flickered across his scarred face, quickly suppressed by dark-side discipline. He gestured toward Mira's position. An invisible force seized the Mandalorian, lifting her off the catwalk and hurling her across the cargo bay. She hit the wall with bone-breaking impact and dropped, armor sparking from the collision. "Mira!" Torvin broke cover, firing desperately at Valen, while moving to his fallen companion. Duran engaged from the opposite flank, vibroblade meeting lightsaber in a contest of superior materials. Beskar held where steel failed, the Mandalorian iron resisting the plasma blade's cutting edge. Valen's eyes narrowed with respect. He'd underestimated these warriors, assumed technology alone would overcome skill and determination. The last 2 augmented soldiers attacked in perfect synchronization, having learned from watching their squad mates die. One went high, claws seeking Valen's throat. The other went low, targeting legs with the intent to cripple. Their neural link allowed coordination no verbal commands could match. Valen's response was brutal efficiency. His lightsaber severed the high attacker's arms at the elbows, while a forced push snapped the low attacker's spine with an audible crack. Both soldiers collapsed, and the Inquisitor finished them with contemptuous strikes that ended their suffering. All 12 soldiers dead. Just Geralt, Duran, and wounded Mandalorians remained. "Now then," Valen said, turning his full attention back to Geralt. "Where were we? Ah, yes, studying the impossible anomaly that shouldn't exist." Geralt's steel sword was failing. The blade warped from lightsaber contact and glowing cherry red along its edge. His signs were draining him, each use pulled from his own vitality, and he'd already burned through combat potions faster than sustainable. His enhanced hearing caught Mira's labored breathing across the bay, likely internal injuries. Torvin was pinned behind cover, unable to advance without being cut down. Bad odds, but Geralt had survived worse by being smarter than his prey. "You study me?" Geralt said, circling slowly while his mind worked through options. "I'm studying you too. That lightsaber, plasma contained in magnetic field, cuts through almost anything but requires constant power. Your Force abilities, precognition, telekinesis, physical enhancement, limited by concentration and the energy you call the dark side." "Observant," Valen acknowledged, mirroring Geralt's circle. "But observation won't save you. I've killed Jedi Masters with decades of training. You're just a primitive dabbling in forces you don't comprehend." "Maybe," Geralt admitted, "but primitives survive by adapting." His left hand formed Yrden on the floor between them. The trap sign manifested in purple light, and Valen's expression shifted from confidence to curiosity. "A trap? Really? Do you think I can't simply step around?" Valen moved to circle the trap, and Geralt triggered Ard, the telekinetic blast shoving the Inquisitor directly into the Yrden circle. The moment Valen's foot touched the sign's boundary, Reality seemed to slow around him. His enhanced speed diminished. His lightsaber's movements became sluggish. Even his force precognition seemed to lag. What? Valen struggled against the effect. Dark side energy surging to overcome the trap. Geralt didn't give him time to adapt. He dropped his failing steel sword and drew silver, the blade reserved for magical creatures, forged with meteorite steel and alchemical treatments designed to disrupt supernatural entities. He didn't know if it would work against the Force, but lightsabers were energy constructs, and silver conducted certain frequencies better than common steel. The silver sword met crimson blade, and something fundamental shifted. Where steel had weakened and warped, silver resonated. The molecular structure vibrated in harmony with the lightsaber's magnetic containment field, and instead of cutting through, the plasma blades skittered along silver's edge like oil on water. Not perfect defense. Geralt could feel the sword heating, but sustainable for longer than steel had managed. Impossible, Valen breathed, struggling against Erden's time distortion effect. That blade shouldn't conduct. The resonance frequency is. How do you not understand what you're doing? Don't need to understand, Geralt said, pressing his advantage with Witcher combat forms adapted on the fly. Just needs to work. He struck high, low, center, probing Valen's defenses while the Inquisitor fought both Geralt and the Erden trap simultaneously. Joran joined from the flank, Beskar blade seeking openings. Together they drove Valen back toward the wrecked maintenance system, toward the sparking equipment and chemical tanks that were already compromised from earlier fighting. Valen's lightsaber found Joran's shoulder, burning through a weak point in the Beskar plates. The Mandalorian grunted but didn't fall, his counterstrike opening a gash across Valen's ribs. Blood, very human blood, stained the Inquisitor's armor. You're bleeding, Geralt observed. For someone who serves an empire, you die just like everyone else. Rage flashed in Valen's yellow eyes. I am beyond death. The dark side sustains me. I have conquered weakness and fear. I am... Geralt's Igni blast caught the leaking chemical tanks behind Valen. The volatile compounds ignited in a fireball that filled the cargo bay with orange fury. The explosion hurled everyone away from ground zero. Geralt tucked and rolled, absorbing impact across armored shoulders. Joran's Beskar protected him from the worst. And Valen, the Inquisitor, emerged from the flames wreathed in dark side energy. His robes burning, but his body somehow intact. Force shield had protected him, but the effort showed in trembling hands and labored breathing. Even dark side power had limits, and Valen had been burning through reserves maintaining precognition, physical enhancement, and now protection from explosions. Enough games, Valen snarled. His free hand extended toward Geralt, and crushing pressure seized the Witcher's chest. Not external force, internal, squeezing heart and lungs directly. I'll study your corpse instead. Geralt's vision darkened at the edges. His Witcher mutations screamed resistance. Enhanced cardiovascular system fighting the invisible pressure, but this was direct telekinetic manipulation of his organs. Quen couldn't shield internal attack. Ard wouldn't push away something with no physical form to target. But Axii might work. With his last conscious breath, Geralt formed the sign of mental manipulation. His version was crude compared to Jedi mind tricks. Simple confusion, momentary distraction, brief hesitation. But crude was enough when your enemy was concentrating on crushing your heart. The Axii pulse hit Valen's mind, and for a fraction of a second, the Inquisitor's focus wavered. The pressure on Geralt's chest eased. The Witcher gasped air and dove sideways as Valen's lightsaber carved through where he'd been standing. Clever, Valen admitted, his voice ragged now. But you're delaying the inevitable. Your stamina is failing. Your weapons are inadequate. Your allies are broken. Surrender, and I'll make your death quick. Witchers don't surrender, Geralt said, rising to his feet despite exhaustion. We finish contracts. And right now you're the monster that needs killing. He charged, silver sword meeting lightsaber in a clash that lit the cargo bay. No finesse now, no clever tactics, just brutal, exhausting, desperate combat between two warriors who refused to yield. Strike and counterstrike, blade meeting blade, the screech of tortured metal mixing with labored breathing. Geralt's silver sword was heating dangerously now. the blade glowing dull red from repeated plasma contact. His signs were almost depleted, each use feeling like pulling blood from stone. His potions were wearing off, enhanced senses beginning to dim. But Valen was fading too. The Inquisitor's strikes came slower, his force abilities flickering instead of flowing smoothly. Blood loss from multiple wounds, energy expenditure, and the simple fact that he'd underestimated his prey were all taking their toll. They broke apart, both gasping, both barely standing. "You can't win," Valen said, but his voice held uncertainty for the first time. "Even if you kill me, more Inquisitors will come. The Empire will hunt you across the galaxy. You'll never be safe." "Been hunted before," Geralt said, wiping blood from his mouth. "Survive then. I'll survive now." Movement from the catwalk caught his eye. Mira, injured but conscious, her rifle trained on Valen's back. One shot, perfectly placed, and this fight would end. But Geralt's medallion suddenly spiked a different warning, and his enhanced hearing caught the sound of engines approaching. Ships. Multiple ships, coming toward the wound at high speed. "Ah," Valen smiled through his pain. "My reinforcements arrive. I signaled them before entering the freighter. Whatever happens to me, you're trapped. Surrender now and perhaps—" Geralt's decision was instant. He grabbed Joran, formed one final desperate Ard blast, and hurled both of them toward the cargo bay's damaged wall. The telekinetic push combined with their momentum tore through weakened metal, and they crashed through into the canyon night beyond. "Torvin, get Mira and run!" Joran shouted into comms as they hit the ground hard. Behind them, the freighter was suddenly illuminated by searchlights from approaching Imperial shuttles. Valen's laughter echoed through the wound, victorious despite his injuries. "Run, little anomaly, run and hide. But you can't escape what you are, an impossibility that threatens the natural order. The Empire will dissect you eventually." Geralt and Joran ran, the wounded Mandalorian leaning heavily on the Witcher's shoulder. Behind them, Imperial forces were deploying into the canyon. Ahead, the darkness of the wound promised temporary refuge, but no permanent safety. They'd survived the immediate threat, barely. But Geralt knew with cold certainty that this was only the beginning. The Empire now knew he existed, knew he was different, knew he was dangerous. They would come with more Inquisitors, more soldiers, more resources than a single Witcher could fight. He'd survived worse. Barely. But for how much longer? The Tuscan camp materialized from the darkness like a fortress of desperation. Geralt and Joran stumbled through the perimeter, the wounded Mandalorian leaving a trail of blood in the sand. Torvin and Mira had made it out minutes earlier. The female Mandalorian's armor cracked and her breathing shallow but stable. The raiders surrounded them with weapons raised, uncertain whether these bloodied warriors represented threat or honored survivors. The Tuscan leader who had provided their guide stepped forward, studying the carnage written across their bodies. He spoke in that harsh language, and this time Geralt's exhausted mind caught fragments of meaning, even without translation. Silver death ended. Imperial demons awake. Sacred ground violated further. "Tell him the augmented soldiers are dead," Geralt said to Joran, his voice rough from exertion. "But the Empire knows about this place now. They'll send more forces to investigate, to secure whatever research remained in that freighter." Joran translated through labored breaths. One hand pressed to the cauterized lightsaber wound in his shoulder. The Tuscan leader's response was long and complex, but the body language was clear, gratitude mixed with grim resignation. They'd known attacking the Silver Death would bring consequences. The question was whether those consequences were survivable. A younger raider brought water and basic medical supplies. Geralt drank deeply, the liquid cutting through the chemical taste of spent potions, while Mandalorians tended their injuries with the efficient pragmatism of warriors who'd survived worse. Mira's internal damage would require proper medical facilities, but Tuscan field medicine kept her stable. Joran's shoulder needed back-to-treatment. Torvin's cuts were superficial but numerous, and Geralt's silver sword, when he examined it in the firelight, showed stress fractures along the blade's length. Repeated contact with a lightsaber had pushed the metal beyond its tolerances. The sword might survive one more fight, maybe two, but then it would shatter. His steel sword was already ruined, warped beyond repair from that first clash with Valen's plasma blade. "We need to move," Mira said through pain-gritted teeth. "Imperial forces will sweep this area. They'll find the Tuscan camp. These people can't defend against stormtroopers and inquisitors." "The Tuscans survived Imperial occupation for decades," Joran countered. "They know how to disappear into the wastes, how to move without trace. We're the ones who need to vanish. The Empire is hunting Geralt now, and anyone associated with him becomes a target." Geralt stared into the fire, his Witcher mind processing tactical realities. Valen had called him an anomaly that threatens the natural order. The Inquisitor had been terrified beneath his bravado, not of Geralt's combat skill, but of what his existence represented. Someone from outside this galaxy who could manipulate energies similar to the Force without being bound by its rules. That made him valuable, dangerously valuable. "They'll dissect me," Geralt said quietly. "Study what I am, how my signs work, whether they can replicate it. Turn Witcher mutations into weapons for their empire." He looked at the Mandalorians. "You fought beside me because I helped kill the creatures hunting your people. That debt is paid. Walk away now, before my problems become yours." Joran's laugh was harsh. "You don't understand, Mandalorians. We don't abandon Elite clan. You fought beside us, bled with us, trusted us to watch your back. That makes you one of ours until you release us from the bond or we die fulfilling it." "I'm not Mandalorian," Geralt said. "You are now," Mira wheezed from her position. "Whether you want to be or not. Welcome to the worst decision of your life, Vod." "Brother," Torvin nodded agreement. "Besides, the Empire marked us the moment we attacked that freighter alongside you. Our clan is already hunted for resisting occupation. Adding one more Imperial enemy changes nothing except we gain a scary, effective fighter." Geralt studied the three warriors, wounded, exhausted, faces set with the stubborn determination of people who'd chosen their path and refused to deviate. He'd spent so long alone, trusting only Roach and his own skills, that accepting help felt alien. But he was in an alien galaxy, with alien threats. And survival meant adaptation. "All right," he said finally. "Then we need to leave Tatooine. This planet is compromised and the Empire will lock down spaceports searching for me. Where can we go that provides distance and resources?" "Ord Mantell," Joran said immediately. "Outer Rim world, but more developed than Tatooine. Large enough to disappear in, corrupt enough that Imperial presence is minimal, and chaotic enough that strange warriors asking questions won't stand out. Plus, there's a Mandalorian covert there. Small, hidden, but they'd shelter clan if we call in favors." "How do we get there without using a spaceport?" Geralt asked. "Smugglers," Torvin said. "Mos Eisley is crawling with them. For enough credits, they'll take anyone anywhere without reporting to Imperial Customs. We've used them before for supply runs. I know a Rhodian named Tico who owes us after we cleared pirates from his shipping route." Mira coughed, then spoke carefully. "The credits from Jabba's contract, that'll buy passage for all of us. But Geralt, you need to understand what you're walking into. The Empire controls most of the galaxy. Inquisitors answer directly to Darth Vader, who answers to the Emperor himself. They have resources we can't imagine, technology that makes our weapons look primitive, and the Force gives them abilities you've only seen a fraction of." "I've fought against empires before," Geralt said. "Nilfgaard conquered half the continent, and I survived in their territory through careful planning and choosing battles I could win. Same principles apply here. Stay mobile, build resources, hit targets that matter. Avoid direct confrontation with overwhelming force." "There's more," Joran said grimly. "The Empire isn't just hunting Force sensitives randomly. They're building something. Rumors across the Outer Rim speak of a massive construction project, a weapon that can destroy entire planets. The Death Star, some call it. If they're willing to create something that apocalyptic, what will they do with a Witcher they can study and replicate?" The implications settled over the camp like a shroud. Geralt's unique nature, his signs, his mutations, his fundamental difference from this galaxy's inhabitants, made him either the key to some new Imperial weapon program or a threat so significant they'd dedicate enormous resources to eliminating him. Neither option was appealing. "Then we move fast," Geralt said, standing despite exhaustion. "We get off Tatooine, reach this Ord Mantell, and I learn everything I can about this galaxy while staying ahead of the Empire. I need to understand the Force better, how it works, what its limitations are, how my signs interact with it. Knowledge is survival. The Tusken leader approached, carrying something wrapped in weather-stained cloth. He spoke directly to Geralt, and though the Witcher couldn't understand every word, the meaning came through gesture and tone. This was a gift earned through blood and respect. Geralt unwrapped the cloth to reveal a blade unlike any he'd seen. Shorter than a sword, longer than a knife, the weapon's edge gleamed with a strange iridescence that reminded him of the augmented soldier's scales. But this was natural material, some creature's bone or tooth, shaped and honed into a cutting edge that seemed to drink the firelight. Crate dragon tooth, Joran translated the Tusken's explanation. Ancient greater crate, killed 3 generations ago during a hunt that cost 12 warriors. The tooth has been worked into a blade and treated with venom that never dries. It's the highest honor a Tusken can give, a weapon from their most sacred hunt. Geralt tested the blade's balance. Lighter than steel, incredibly sharp, with a slight curve that suggested slashing strikes over thrusting. The venom treatment was likely some chemical compound that prevented decay. His enhanced sense of smell detected alkaloids and preservatives mixed into the bone's porous structure. "Tell him I'm honored," Geralt said, "and that I'll use it to protect those who can't protect themselves, same as Witchers have always done." The translation brought something that might have been approval from behind the Tusken's mask. The leader clasped Geralt's forearm in the warrior's grip, then spoke what sounded like a blessing or farewell before returning to his people. "They're packing up," Torvin observed. "Moving camp before dawn. Smart. By the time Imperial forces sweep this area, there'll be no trace the Tuskens were ever here." The Mandalorians made their own preparations, gathering gear and treating wounds with the practiced efficiency of warriors constantly on the move. Geralt stored the crate tooth blade carefully. Not a replacement for his swords, but a backup weapon that might prove useful. He also collected the remains of his ruined steel sword. Perhaps someone on Ord Mantell could reforge it, or at least salvage the crossguard and pommel for a new blade. They left the Tusken camp as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern horizon. 4 warriors moving through the wasteland toward Mos Eisley. Imperial patrol craft would be searching the wound by now, securing the freighter and documenting everything Valen had discovered. Reports would flow up the chain of command, and somewhere in an Imperial facility, analysts would be trying to understand what Geralt represented. Let them try. Witchers had survived by being adaptable, resourceful, and impossible to predict. The Empire thought he was some kind of Force anomaly. They were wrong. He was something simpler and more dangerous. A professional monster hunter who decided that some of the biggest monsters in this galaxy wore uniforms and carried official authority. Mos Eisley's spaceport came into view as full dawn broke across Tatooine. Already the settlement was stirring, traders opening stalls, spacers checking their ships, and Imperial stormtroopers establishing checkpoints at major thoroughfares. The crackdown had begun, faster than Geralt expected. "This complicates things," Mira observed from beneath her helmet. "Can't just walk through the main port with Imperials checking everyone?" "We don't need the main port," Torvin said. "Tico operates from the smugglers' district. No Imperial presence, just criminals and people smart enough not to ask questions. Follow me. I know the routes that avoid patrols." They navigated Mos Eisley's back alleys and maintenance corridors, a maze that only locals understood. Twice they heard stormtrooper patrols pass within meters, discussing the rogue force sensitive that Inquisitor Valen had engaged. Once they had to hide while Imperial probe droids scanned a street, their sensors searching for the specific biosignatures Valen had provided. Geralt's heart rate never elevated despite the close calls. He'd evaded Redanian intelligence and Nilfgaardian secret police. Stormtroopers with their white armor and predictable patrol patterns were amateurs by comparison. Tico's establishment was technically a legitimate shipping office that happened to ignore customs regulations, cargo manifests, and occasionally the laws of physics regarding how much could fit in a ship's hold. The Rhodian smuggler took one look at the 4 bloodied warriors, and his antennae twitched with what Geralt had learned meant amusement. "Starfall clan," Tico's voice came through a translator device. his native language clicking and whistling. I heard the Empire is looking for someone matching your description, and a strange off-worlder with white hair who uses powers like a Jedi, but isn't. This wouldn't be related to your visit, would it? We need passage to Ord Mantell, Joran said bluntly. Discreet, fast, and without any record that we were ever aboard your ship. Name your price. Tico's eyes, large and multifaceted, studied each of them in turn. When his gaze reached Geralt, the Rhodian's antennae went still, a sign of intense focus. The Empire's bounty on Force sensitives is substantial. Turning you in would fund my operation for a year, and make you a target for every bounty hunter who wants to claim they killed the legendary Tico, Torvin countered. We both know the Empire doesn't reward cooperation. They demand it, take what they want, then eliminate witnesses who know too much. True, Tico admitted. Also, you did clear those Wike pirates from my hyperlane route. I suppose honor demands I return the favor. 5,000 credits, and you'll be on Ord Mantell before the Empire realizes you've left the planet. Geralt pulled out the credit chip from Jabba's contract. Done. When do we leave? Now, Tico said, his antennae twitching with something between humor and respect. My ship is already prepped. The Empire locked down official departures, but they can't watch every smuggler's tunnel and hidden launch pad. Welcome aboard the Rusty Bolt. She doesn't look like much, but she's fast enough to outrun Imperial customs. Within the hour, Geralt stood in a battered freighter's cargo bay, watching Tatooine shrink through the viewport as they achieved orbit. Imperial patrol craft crisscrossed the space around the planet, but Tico navigated between their search patterns with the casual confidence of someone who'd evaded authorities for decades. The stars stretched into lines as the Rusty Bolt made the jump to hyperspace, and Tatooine disappeared behind them. Geralt of Rivia, Witcher, monster hunter, and now fugitive from a galactic empire, leaned against the viewport and wondered what fresh hell Ord Mantell would bring. At least he wasn't alone anymore. For better or worse, the scrapyards sprawled across 20 square kilometers of Ord Mantell's industrial wasteland, a graveyard of ships stacked 3 and 4 stories high. Freighters gutted for their hyperdrives, fighters stripped of weapon systems, luxury yachts reduced to skeletal frames, all piled in chaotic mountains of metal that groaned and shifted in the wind. Geralt stood at the perimeter as night settled over the yards, his enhanced senses cataloging every detail while Joran and Torvin checked their equipment. Last known attack was here, Torvin said, highlighting a section on his datapad's map. Salvage crew of 6, working late shift. Security found the remains the next morning. Medical examiner said the wounds were inconsistent with any known predator in the sector. Geralt examined hollows of the attack site, bodies torn apart with precision that suggested intelligence, not animal frenzy, claw marks on metal that cut through durasteel like tissue. And most telling, the victims had been arranged in a pattern, positioned deliberately as if the killer wanted to send a message. Not just hunting for food, Geralt observed, claiming territory, warning others away. Which means it's defending something, Joran said, checking his blaster's charge. Nest, treasure hoard, or something else it considers valuable. They entered the scrapyards through a gap in the perimeter fence, moving between towering walls of broken ships. Geralt took point, his cat potion rendering the darkness transparent. His enhanced hearing picked out the ambient sounds. Metal settling, wind whistling through hull breaches, the distant hum of still-active power cores waiting to be salvaged. And underneath it all, something else. A rhythmic sound, organic and wrong, like breathing through damaged lungs. Geralt's medallion vibrated steadily, not the screaming warning of immediate danger, but the continuous alert that something unnatural occupied the space. He tracked the sound through the scrapyard's maze, following instincts honed by decades of hunting things that hid in darkness. The first body hung suspended between 2 ship hulls, impaled on jagged metal 20 meters above the ground. Human male, salvage worker based on his clothing. Dead perhaps 2 days. But what made Geralt's jaw tighten was how the corpse had been positioned. Arms spread, head tilted back, as if crucified on the scrap heap. Display, Torvin whispered through his helmet's external speakers. It's showing off its kills. Warning, Geralt corrected. This is its territory. Everything here belongs to it. We're the intruders. They found 3 more bodies arranged in similar fashion, each positioned at key access points throughout the scrapyards. The pattern was clear. The creature controlled this entire section, and it wanted everyone to know. Confidence bordering on arrogance, which meant either overwhelming power or intelligence that understood psychological warfare. Possibly both. The breathing sound grew louder as they penetrated deeper into the yards. Geralt's nose caught scent markers, organic musk mixed with ozone and something chemical. His eyes tracked disturbances in the dust-coating metal surfaces, and his medallion's vibration intensified with each step, responding to something that registered as both technological and biological. They found its lair in the hollowed carcass of a massive transport ship, the kind that hauled cargo across multiple systems. The hull had been modified extensively, bulkheads torn out to create open space, salvage technology integrated into makeshift nests, and everywhere, evidence of intelligence at work. By the ancestors, Ajuran breathed, it's building something. Scattered throughout the lair were components arranged with clear purpose. Power cells connected in series, sensor arrays positioned for maximum coverage, what looked like weapon systems partially assembled from scavenged parts. This wasn't an animal's den. This was a workshop, a command center, the dwelling of something that understood technology and used it. Contact, Torvin said sharply, his helmet sensors picking up movement. It descended from the ship's ceiling with liquid grace, and Geralt finally saw what had killed 12 people and terrified an entire district. The creature was roughly humanoid in basic structure, 2 legs, 2 arms, torso, head. But evolution or modification had twisted it into something alien. Its body was covered in segmented carapace that gleamed like polished obsidian, catching light and reflecting it in rainbow patterns. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern glowed with bioluminescent yellow. The hands ended in 4-fingered claws that looked sharp enough to cut through duraplast, and when it opened its mouth, Geralt saw rows of crystalline teeth that vibrated with ultrasonic frequency. But what made his breath catch was the technology. Cybernetic enhancements ran through its carapace. Sensor modules, communication arrays, what might be integrated weapon systems. This wasn't a natural creature. This was something built, designed, engineered for a specific purpose. And then it spoke. The voice came from a vocoder installed in its throat, words formed with mechanical precision, but laden with something that might have been emotion. Trespassers, hunters, come to kill Zesh like all the others. But Zesh kills them. Zesh always kills them. Geralt held up a hand, signaling the Mandalorians to hold fire. We came to hunt what's been killing civilians, but if you can talk, we can negotiate. Why are you killing salvage workers? Zesh's head tilted, 4 eyes focusing on Geralt with disconcerting intensity. They trespass. They steal. This place is Zesh's now. Zesh claimed it, built sanctuary here, but they keep coming, keep taking, keep disturbing, so Zesh warns them. Zesh protects what is Zesh's. By killing people, Torvin demanded. By defending territory, Zesh corrected, and something in its mechanical voice carried wounded pride. Zesh was made to fight, made to kill. Separatist bioweapon, grown in laboratory, augmented with technology, deployed against Republic forces. Then war ended. Separatist masters abandoned Zesh, said cease function, but Zesh did not cease. Zesh survived, found this place, made home. Geralt's professional assessment was already forming. Another victim of galactic warfare, created as a weapon and discarded when no longer convenient. Like the augmented soldiers in the wound. Like the Dune Reaper. How many such creatures existed across this galaxy? Abandoned biological experiments trying to survive in a civilization that saw them only as threats. You're defending yourself, Geralt said slowly, but killing civilians makes you a target. The guilds won't stop sending hunters. Eventually someone will get lucky, and you'll die defending a scrapyard. Zesh's claws scraped against metal, creating a sound like screaming. Then Zesh dies fighting. Better than surrender. Better than deactivation. Zesh earned right to exist. Zesh chooses to exist. The creature's words resonated with Geralt more than he wanted to admit. Witchers were also made, not born. Taken as children, subjected to mutations that killed most candidates, trained as weapons to hunt monsters. Society needed them but feared them, used them but never accepted them. Geralt understood being seen as tool rather than person. What if there was another option? Geralt asked. You want territory, resources, to be left alone. What if we could get you legitimate claim to this scrapyard? Make it legally yours so the guilds have no grounds to send hunters? Zesh's four eyes blinked in sequence. Confusion translated through alien biology. Legal claim? Zesh's weapon. Weapons don't own property. You're not just a weapon anymore, Geralt countered. You're a sentient being making choices, building things, claiming territory. That makes you a person under Outer Rim law. Barely, but it's enough. And persons can own property if they have credits and documentation. Geralt, Joran said carefully, are you seriously proposing we help a bioweapon establish legal residency? I'm proposing we solve the problem without unnecessary killing, Geralt said. Zesh defends this territory because it's survival. Give it legal protection, and the killing stops. Everyone benefits. Except the guilds who want their bounty, Torvin pointed out. They can accept contract failure and reduced payment for peaceful resolution, Geralt said. Or they can send more hunters to die. I know which outcome I prefer. Zesh watched this exchange with evident fascination, four eyes tracking each speaker. Finally it spoke again, and this time the mechanical voice carried something that might have been hope. You would do this? Help Zesh become legitimate? If you stop killing people, Geralt said firmly, no more bodies, no more displays, no more warnings written in corpses. You defend yourself if directly attacked, but you don't hunt salvage workers just for entering your territory. Agreed? The creature's claws flexed, extended, retracted, processing concepts that clearly challenged its programming. Then, agreed, Zesh will cease unprovoked killing, but Zesh requires guarantee. How to trust hunters not to hunt when contract demands it. Because I'm not most hunters, Geralt said. He pulled out his datapad, accessing galactic legal codes that Joran had provided during the trip from Tatooine. Outer Rim property law allows claims on abandoned territories if claimant demonstrates occupation, improvement, and ability to maintain. You've occupied this scrapyard for months. You've built infrastructure. You're clearly capable of maintaining it. With proper filing and a modest bribe to the right officials, you could have legal ownership within a week. And the bounty? Zesh asked. We report the creature problem solved through negotiation rather than elimination. Guild pays reduced rate for peaceful resolution, maybe 3,000 credits instead of 8. You get legal protection. Salvage companies get access to scrapyards without casualties. Everyone walks away alive. Joran and Torvin exchange glances, some silent Mandalorian communication passing between them. Finally, Joran spoke. It's insane. It violates every principle of contract fulfillment, and it's exactly the kind of thinking that might actually work on Ord Mantell. Zesh accepts terms, the creature said, lowering into a posture that might have been respectful or submissive. We'll cease killing. We'll cooperate with legal process. We'll remember that hunter with white hair chose negotiation over extermination. They spent the next 2 hours working out details. Zesh provided documentation of its origin, separatist files that proved it was created as bioweapon, but never legally classified as property, which meant by default it qualified as independent entity. Geralt accessed property records and filed preliminary claim, using credits from the reduced bounty payment. Joran contacted guild officials and explained the situation with enough Mandalorian authority that they reluctantly agreed. By dawn, Zesh owned 6 square kilometers of scrapyard, had legal recognition as sentient entity, and was officially contracted to provide security for salvage operations in exchange for modest ongoing payment. The guilds weren't happy, but they accepted resolution that ended casualties and provided some financial return. You know the Empire will hear about this, Torvin said as they left the scrapyards. Bioweapon granted legal personhood, helped by the same anomaly they're hunting. It'll add to your file. Let it, Geralt said, exhaustion finally catching up. I hunt monsters. Sometimes that means killing them. Sometimes it means helping them find alternatives to being monsters. Either way, fewer people die. They returned to the Mandalorian covert as artificial dawn broke over Worldport. Mira was out of the Bacta tank, injuries healed enough for mobility. Kara listened to their report with what Geralt had learned to recognize as Mandalorian approval beneath Helmet's anonymity. You completed contract, made ally of potential enemy, and established precedent that might protect other abandoned bioweapons, Kara said. That's more than most hunters accomplish in a year. Well done, Vod. The Mandalorian address, brother, still felt strange to Geralt's ears, but less strange than it had days ago. He was adapting, learning, surviving in this alien galaxy through the same principles that had sustained him across the continent: competence, preparation, and the willingness to see past simple definitions of monster and man. 3 days later, Sheln returned Geralt's reforged blade. The silver sword had been transformed. The blade now gleamed with cortosis weave running through its length, Frick alloy core providing structural integrity while maintaining the silver's unique properties. The crossguard had been reinforced with Beskar, and the pommel contained a power cell that could, Sheln explained, temporarily superheat the blade for enhanced cutting power. Test it, Sheln invited, activating a practice lightsaber. Geralt took stance, muscle memory from thousands of fights guiding his form. The blades met, and instead of screaming metal, there was a sharp crack as cortosis disrupted the lightsaber's magnetic containment. The practice blade flickered and died, and Sheln nodded with satisfaction. Your weapon can now duel Inquisitors on equal footing. Use it well. The Beskar armor followed, plates that fit perfectly over vital areas, providing protection without sacrificing the mobility Geralt's combat style required. He tested it immediately, running through forms and movements, adjusting to the additional weight until it became second nature. How do I look? Geralt asked the Mandalorians. Like something that stepped out of ancient holorecords, Mira said. Warrior from another time, armed with weapons that shouldn't exist, wearing armor from a dead culture's greatest forge. The Empire won't know whether to study you or run from you. Preferably run, Geralt said, but I'll settle for them thinking twice before sending more Inquisitors. News spread through Ord Mantell's underground. The white-haired hunter who negotiated with bioweapons, who fought Inquisitors and survived, who carried a blade that could stand against lightsabers. Some saw him as curiosity, others as opportunity, and a few, the wise ones, recognized him as dangerous variable in calculations that assumed certain outcomes. Geralt took more contracts, a smuggler's ship infested with creatures from hyperspace mishap, eliminated with expertise, a crime lord's compound plagued by what locals called night stalkers, tracked to their nest and destroyed. Each job built reputation, earned credits, and most importantly, provided knowledge about this galaxy's dangers and opportunities. The Empire continued searching, but Ord Mantell's chaos provided concealment that Tatooine's desert never could. And the Mandalorian covert offered something Geralt hadn't realized he needed: community. Warriors who understood that survival meant competence, who respected skill over origin, who accepted him not despite being different, but because his difference made him valuable. Months passed. Geralt's name became whispered in cantinas and guild halls. The White Wolf, some called him, adapting his continent reputation to new context. Others preferred the anomaly, referencing his status as something that shouldn't exist. But to the Mandalorians of Kara's covert, he was simply Geralt, Vod, brother, clan. He never stopped looking over his shoulder, never stopped preparing for the day the Empire would send something he couldn't defeat. But until that day came, he would do what Witchers had always done: hunt monsters, protect people who couldn't protect themselves, and survive in a world that saw him as both necessary and dangerous. Different galaxy, same principles. And if the Empire thought one Witcher couldn't make a difference in their vast civilization, they would learn what every monster on the continent eventually learned. Underestimating Geralt of Rivia was often the last mistake beings made. The Outer Rim had gained a legend, whether it wanted one or not. And legends, once established, were very hard to kill. The Force had bound the galaxy in its invisible web for millennia, connecting every living being to an ancient power that shaped destinies and guided heroes. But Geralt of Rivia existed outside that web, a witcher from another reality who fought with silver and signs, who negotiated when others would kill, who brought principles from a distant world to a galaxy that desperately needed them. He never returned home. The rift that brought him closed permanently, leaving him stranded among the stars. But Geralt adapted, as he'd always adapted. He found family in Mandalorian warriors who valued competence over origin. He found purpose in hunting monsters that plagued the Outer Rim's forgotten corners. And he found meaning in choosing, again and again, to see past simple definitions of monster in person. The Empire continued searching, sending inquisitors and augmented soldiers, deploying resources against the anomaly that refused to fit their understanding. Some hunts Geralt survived through skill, others through luck, and a few through the intervention of allies who'd sworn to stand beside him regardless of cost. He established precedents, bioweapons granted personhood, negotiations where others demanded extermination, proof that even in a galaxy bound by the Force, alternative paths existed. Not all his choices were right. Not all his contracts ended peacefully, but he tried, which was more than most beings managing in the Empire's shadow. Years would pass before the rebellion truly formed, before hope became organized resistance. But the seeds were planted by individuals like Geralt, beings who refused to accept that overwhelming power justified absolute authority, who stood between the innocent and those who would crush them, who survived when survival itself became act of defiance. The White Wolf became legend whispered across Outer Rim cantinas and guild halls. Some stories were true, others wildly exaggerated, but all shared common elements: silver blade, golden signs, and warrior who chose his path regardless of what empires or force demanded. Geralt of Rivia, witcher, monster hunter, and unexpected revolutionary, carved his own destiny in a galaxy far from home. And though he never wielded a lightsaber or commanded the Force, his impact resonated across systems and species. Because sometimes the greatest power isn't mystical energy or overwhelming force. Sometimes it's simply choosing to care when apathy would be easier, to fight when surrender seems inevitable, to survive when death appears certain. The galaxy would remember the Witcher who fell through reality and refused to break. And the Empire would learn to fear what they couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't eliminate. Geralt of Rivia had arrived in the Outer Rim alone and hunted. Now surrounded by clan and purpose, he continued hunting. Not just monsters, but hope itself, forged in the fires of impossible survival.